is a very gratifying turnout, and it means a lot to Helen and me. This is Helen Fitzgerald. Helen is from South Church. It's very hard for me to conceive that I didn't know Helen a year ago, because we have been on such a journey that she's dear and close to my heart. It's just amazing that it's been such a short time, and I'm so delighted to be on this journey with her. I see a lot of family out here, so I've got my own family from Concord and from Newton, and the TBJ extended family that I've been a member of for almost 35 years, South Church people, other interfaith people, friends from Nashua, J Street, Portsmouth, lots of people here, and colleagues, and it's so gratifying. Thank you. Of course, the trouble with family is sometimes you have the worst fights with your family, so that certainly is a risk, but we are confident we want to really have a dialogue about this in a way that we usually don't. I want to call out two special people. There are two other people here who made the trip with us. From the Seacoast, Jean Shula. Jean, can you stand up? Jean is an educator, a psychotherapist. I think she's written a book or two or three, and established a hospice house and then ran it. And Linda Meqbil. Can you stand up? She's from Kittery. Linda is a very skilled artist and a junior pastoral counselor, and is that right? Pastoral care giver. We were really honored to have them on the trip, and I have to say, I wouldn't be in compassionate listening if it weren't for Linda. It was in May of last year, I went to the Seacoast to hear an Israeli activist named Gershon Baskin speak. And by chance, I sat next to Linda. We started sharing our experiences about our trips to Israel. She had been there 3 times before, I'd been there twice. And she sat there and just listened to me about my concerns and anxieties and desire to go back. And she said, "You have to go on this compassionate listening trip." So I went home and looked at the website, and I said, I have to go on this compassionate listening trip. And then I told my wife, Mary, and she said, "You have to go on this compassionate listening trip." And then I had my intake interview with Andrea Cohen from Greenfield, Massachusetts. She's the rabbi of the Temple of Israel. And we had several conversations, and at the end she said, "You have to go on this trip." I'm a member of an interfaith group with Helen. We meet once a month, and I told the group in July, and something funny happened to Helen. She got this amazing look in her eyes, and you said, what did you say?
I have to go on this trip.
So over the next 90 minutes or so, we want to give you an idea of why we feel that the Compassionate Listening Project chose us. We didn't choose it. There's a veteran Palestinian peace activist named Ali Abdul Wahab, and he likes to say, the road to a Palestinian state goes through the heart of the Jewish people. If they know me, if they trust me, then they will want for me what I want for myself. Gershon Baskin, that peace activist that I met in May, is also a journalist, and he wrote a Jerusalem Post editorial just last month. He said, "There will be no peace and reconciliation until we learn that the only way we can live in this land with security is when we cease to see others living here as our enemy." I think Ali and Gershon are both saying the same thing. Palestinians will get their state when enough individual Israelis decide to give it to them. And Israel will get the security it needs when enough individual Palestinians decide to give it to them. It's going to take a critical mass of individuals to lead the leaders, and the leaders will follow. If there's any hope for a sustainable peace, each side has to begin by recognizing the humanity of the other, and that's why we're here today. How many of you have visited Israel? That's a lot. How many of you, while you were in Israel, got to know Israelis on the street, went into their homes, visited them in their schools, their synagogues, getting to know their concerns, what their life is like? How many of you have visited Palestinians in the West Bank to get to know them, know what their concerns are, understand what their daily life is like? We've got at least 2 people. The problem is that very few Israelis know and talk to Palestinians these days, and very few Palestinians know and talk to Israelis these days. And in large part because they're each very fearful of the other. And that's often a surprise for people to know that, for each side to discover that the other side is just as afraid of them as they are of the other side. We heard that over and over again while we were there. Fear in Israel and Palestine plays on an even playing field. Getting to know the other, getting to trust the other requires meeting the other, and for a lot of reasons that just does not happen today. So for 12 days in November, Helen and I had this remarkable privilege of doing what most Israelis and Palestinians never do, along with Linda and Jean and 15 other people from North America, 1 person from London. We met and listened to Israelis and Palestinians on both sides of the wall, representing a broad range of perspectives and life experiences. We sat in the living rooms of several Israeli settlers in the West Bank, and at the other end of the spectrum we had a luncheon feast in the home of a former Hamas mayor of the town of Beit Umar in the West Bank. All these people we met have lost family, often immediate family, friends, neighbors, their children's schoolmates, their colleagues to violence. Some have previously engaged in violent tactics themselves, but all of them now feel so strongly about the futility of violence that they're willing to risk their livelihoods and their lives to bring that vision of Ali and Gershon just a little bit closer. Today we're going to tell you, in their own words, the stories of 6 of the 25 or 30 people that we met who have come to want for the other what they want for themselves. We're calling this a third way of thinking about Israel and Palestine because we're not going to debate which side is on the right side. There's plenty of time to do that other times, other places. This is not a debate. We're not going to decide who's the greater victim. And again, there's plenty of time to do that. That's usually what we do when we discuss this. So what we want to do is put aside our own understanding of the truth just long enough to recognize that everybody's truth is necessarily incomplete. No one has to abandon your own version of the truth, and we have no intention of persuading anybody to give up the way you see things. But what we want to do is to recognize that there are other ways to look at this. One of the veterans of compassionate listening is a woman named Andrea Cohen, different Andrea from our guide. She stated what we're going to do today very succinctly in a small book that she wrote, sort of Compassionate Listening 101. And I'll read it directly. She said, imagine 2 people looking through opposite windows into the same house. Each sees a different view, and neither sees the whole. Whose view is real? Well, the obvious answer is both. Only when you are able to get to the other person's window, step in their shoes, and see the view that they see, will you know that his or her perspective is also real. The more windows there are, the more versions of truth there are likely to be. And when it comes to Israel and Palestine, a lot of you know, there's not 2 windows, there's 2,000. So, one word of caution before we begin. It goes without saying that many of us bring very strong passions to this topic. I'm one of them. As an American Jew born 3 years after the end of the Holocaust, I was raised on the classic Zionist narrative, and for much of my life, I got very defensive when anybody would question Israel. That's changed quite a bit in the last 15 to 20 years, but I still get defensive when I talk to people about Israel and they don't agree with me. And I stop listening, I tune out. And while they're still talking, I often am formulating my rebuttals, right? And then I notice that my chest is tight, my heart is pounding, and my gut is boiling, and suddenly there's no listening going on. So what compassionate listening has taught me is that we can all recognize when that happens. And we all have the ability to step aside and bring ourselves back to our settings and open our hearts again to listen compassionately to that story. During our journey, our guides frequently reminded us to slow down to the speed of wisdom. I love that phrase. Slow down to the speed of wisdom, because compassionate listening is a slow, centered process. The wisdom is not in the head, it's in the heart. So we're going to present 6 readings. We'll have a moment of reflection after each reading. And then at the end, we have some thoughts about how we all can process this, because we've presented this several times now in other venues. And what we've learned is that the discussion and the conversation and reflection is at least as valuable as hearing the narrative. We want to save some time for that. We have some alternative ways to do that. First, Helen is going to describe the basics of compassionate listening.
So before I start describing compassionate listening, I just want to say that I'm here this afternoon with a grateful heart. I'm grateful for the warm welcome that Temple Beth Jacob has extended to me and to us, and especially to Rabbi Robin. I'm grateful for the interest in compassionate listening that each of you demonstrates by being here. And of course, I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with Joel, who is my friend. So I have the amazing task of, in a short amount of time, trying to tell you what compassionate listening is. So I do have an introduction, but it comes with several disclaimers. First, given the amount of time we have together, this will just be a glimpse, just a little peek. At first glance, compassionate listening seems deceptively simple, but it's an art that needs a lifetime of practice. Next, I'm a beginner at compassionate listening. And I'm just learning about it. I'm not certified as a trainer. There are people who have devoted their life to this, but I can share what I know about it. And last, compassionate listening is just one peacemaking approach. In no way does it eliminate or supersede other ways of making peace, such as nonviolent resistance, advocacy, lobbying, social activism, scholarship, diplomacy, negotiation. There are a lot of leaves on the tree of peacemaking. So here's some background. Compassionate listening grew out of the work of Jean Knudsen, a Quaker peacemaker who studied with Thich Nhat Hanh. Sure. You'll hold right there for a minute.
Tell me where you are.
Through her study, Jean came to understand that conflict creates inner wounds that remain unhealed until they are acknowledged. Unhealed wounds can lead to a spiral of ever-worsening problems that eventually solidify or harden into a narrative or personal identity story that can actually spawn more violence. You have a handout of the slide that's on the screen right now that describes this cycle. It's probably a handout familiar to some of you who are psychologists or therapists, but it demonstrates how unhealed wounds of both victims and victimizers can become narratives or personal identity stories that justify retributory violence. Compassionate listening coincides at a critical juncture in the diagram. You'll see at the bottom right side where it splits off. That's where to situate compassionate listening. Intervening at this juncture can open a new pathway leading to possible reconciliation and restorative justice. So the overarching principle is that in hearing each other's story, these unhealed wounds can be revealed, and this allows for mutual compassion and understanding. You know, it's not a new peacemaking idea to listen to the oppressed or the disenfranchised. I think most of us can do that. But the challenge that Jean Knudsen embedded in the compassionate listening approach is to listen to the other, the enemy, with the same degree of openness, non-judgment, and compassion that we bring to those with whom our sympathies lie. Your second handout details the 5 core practices of compassionate listening. This is a handout for you to go over at home if you have the interest in it. I'm going to try gallantly to summarize them in just a few sentences. First, in order to learn how to cultivate compassion, one must learn to step into the other person's shoes and experience their humanity. Second, in order to learn how to develop the fair witness or compassionate presence, one must step back and notice what is happening in your inner experience. Recognize when you're being triggered, and then, having recognized that you're triggered, the practice is to open one's heart again so that you're present. Third, in order to learn to respect yourself and others in these kinds of interactions, one must learn to stay grounded within healthy boundaries, remembering your own contribution to the interaction and respecting that the other person in the interaction can handle themselves. Fourth, in order to learn how to listen with your heart, you have to temporarily step away from your own personal narrative. This means temporarily giving up your beliefs, your opinions, your judgments, because what you're looking to do is authentically understand the other person's motivations, values, and experience. And fifth, in order to learn how to speak from the heart, one must stay anchored in the calm, clear center that is your compassionate heart. Okay, so now that you've had a crash course in compassionate listening, we're going to move into the listening session part of our presentation. In just a minute, we have some readers that Joel will introduce to all of you, who are going to read excerpts from the transcripts of 6 of the stories that were shared with us on our visit. Now here's the instructions. During the reading, we encourage you to notice when your inner voice is trying to interfere. When you find yourself judging, disagreeing, getting triggered emotionally in some way, just try to let that feeling go. Temporarily mute your inner voice just the way you muted your cell phones a little while ago. Our inner thoughts and feelings can limit our ability to really hear what a speaker is trying to communicate. I have to share that when we were on the compassionate listening trip, obviously I and all of my fellow travelers were focusing on listening as well as we knew how. Then I got home and started to transcribe some of these sessions. And I was amazed at the many things that I absolutely didn't hear. It was almost startling to me. Like, was I at that listening session? Was I actually listening? So it really does change what you're able to hear. After the stories, we're going to have a short silence, and then we'll open the floor for you to share your personal responses to the stories by considering these questions. We'll say more about this later, but I just want to let you know that these will be part of our presentation. And now, if you're ready, and would like to put your handouts down, I'll help you transition into a space of compassionate listening. Oh, yes. Oh, please do, yes.
We got some feedback in one of our earlier presentations that not everybody knows the geography of Israel and the West Bank, and we're going to give you a 30-second summary. Most of you who are members of the congregation know this, but some of you do not. Israel and the West Bank are tiny. 436 of them can fit inside the United States. It's about actually a little smaller than the state of New Hampshire. You can see the square miles there. We're going to be talking about the Green Line. The Green Line is actually not an official, legally recognized line. It's the armistice line that was agreed upon in 1949 after the 48 War, with the thought that it would be negotiated. But to this day, it still exists. It's called the Green Line because the people who made it actually took out a green pen and separated the West Bank from Israel. Now, the West Bank is actually west of the Jordan River, but it's east of Israel. And then there's Gaza down in the lower left. The area that we traveled in for 2 weeks is just this tiny area that you see here, about the size of Merrimack County plus some of Hillsborough. So it gives you an idea of how compact the land actually is. Next slide. That's it. Okay, we're ready.
Okay, if you put your handouts down and your feet comfortably on the floor, your back straight but not tensed, your eyes closed or lowered in soft gaze, hands resting quietly in your lap. Now gently bring your attention to the interior of your heart. Experience the spaciousness of this part of you. In this place in your body, the tides of life flow, bringing energy and vitality to you. Rest here, in this most intimate and energetic part of your body. This is the place of compassionate listening. Anchor yourself here in the core of your being. And when you are ready, come back to this gathering to meet our first speaker.
The first speaker is Leah Werber, who lives in K'far Etzion.
We have my next door neighbor, Myron, who's one-on-one helping people understand each other. I think that's important. But the political situation is very, very difficult. No side is completely right, and I'm not optimistic for a solution in the near future.
Our next speaker is Ibrahim Issa. He's the director of Hope Flower School in Beit Jala, which is right outside of Bethlehem. It's 12 miles as the crow flies from Jerusalem, but it's a world apart. He shared a story of his own experience of trauma and how that led him to understand more fully how Hope Flowers needs to support children and families who have experienced trauma. He spoke of the need to move beyond dialogue, to partner with Israelis in what he calls working at the level of the conflict. Ibrahim spoke to us at Hope Flower School on November 5th.
It has been a very unpredictably day here with our students. About half of them came this morning, but because of clashes, we decided to send them home. When we saw that the youths were starting to throw stones and soldiers were coming, we knew it was not safe to wait until things got worse. When you have 350 children, you don't want to take any kind of risk. You might be asking how I came to be at Hope Flower School. My plan was to continue my PhD in mechanical engineering in the Netherlands. Then my father, the founder of this school, died in 2000. I was in conflict whether to continue my PhD or to return home to do this work. Then one day, I met Leah Werber, the founder of the Compassionate Listening Project. I asked her, should I continue my PhD in mechanical engineering or should I return to do the work? And she told me something that keeps hitting me up to this moment. The world has many engineers, but has very few people to work for peace. I said to her, I am not an educator. I don't know anything about peace education. And she said, to do this work, you just need a good heart. And that's true. I can tell you many stories about Hope Flower School. Children have had one of their parents killed, or even both. Children's parents do not have jobs or were shot and injured by the Army. The majority of the children are traumatized. Many of them have severe learning disabilities. Hope Flowers has been building our experience with learning disabilities since 2004. I'm proud to say that we are now the best in the West Bank in providing services for children with disabilities and special needs. Our trauma support program came after a painful personal experience. In 2002, I was awakened at 2 a.m. with loudspeakers around my home and many Israeli soldiers asking someone to give himself up. I was so scared I didn't even look from the window. Our neighbor was working for security, so I thought the army was coming to arrest my neighbor. After an hour of this, the neighbors start to call me and say, Ibrahim, give yourself up, otherwise they will demolish the homes. And I was like, I've never been involved in violence. So I opened the door and gave myself up. Immediately, soldiers grabbed me and put me on the ground and arrested me. One of the commanders said, where are the explosives? I said, apparently you have made a mistake. I'm the director of a school. I am working for peace education. He said to me, bullshit. Tell me where are the explosives? I said, I don't have. Apparently there is a mistake here. He said to me, if you don't tell me where are the explosives, I will demolish the homes. You have 10 seconds to tell me where are the explosives. He started to count. When he reached 0, he said, you are stupid. Your home will be flattened. They started to demolish my home. I was arrested and taken to jail for a week. They tortured me badly, trying to get to know where are the explosives. After 1 week, they released me. It was a mistaken arrest, they said. When I got back, some worker friends from Holland and a psychologist friend came to help me and my family overcome my trauma. It's not that you ever forget it, but you learn how to live with it. I returned to school and started to look for children who had trauma experiences. I found out there were many, and they don't speak about their wounds. I knew it before, in theory, that every act of violence is a result of unhealed wounds. But to live the trauma yourself was something very different. You don't see how bad it is until you are in this. I asked one psychologist, a friend of mine, let's do some volunteer work with people who need your services. She agreed. The first year we had 14 families. We had to convince them to meet with her because, you know, if you are a hero, you should not speak about your wound. The second year, we had more families, and the third year, we had 56 families, and we couldn't do it volunteer anymore. So we started to look for support. We called our program Listen to My Voice, because I and my friend agreed that the victim has an inner voice that warns you. You should listen to that voice, which says a lot. We are now doing it at 100 schools. We train over 200 teachers in the West Bank on how to support their children. The program is successful because it has been born from a wound. You feel why this program is here, and you connect again. For myself, to meet again with that same wound every time. I see it in a child or in families. It is a really beautiful program for me, and I'm committed. One of the things that gives my work meaning in Hope Flower School. Here's a story that gives an idea how bad and difficult the situation is for children. Hamis is now 11 years old. He's a child from the Jenin refugee camp. His father was involved in the Palestinian military resistance and was wanted by the Israelis. He escaped from one place to another. One day he came to visit his families, and the Israelis attacked the home. The Israelis killed the father in front of the children. The Palestinian resistance thought there must be a collaborator who informed the Israelis of the father's presence. They suspected that the mother was a collaborator, so they attacked the home and killed the mother of Hamis in front of the children. It's a very sad story. Hamis was very violent, and he didn't speak. He attacked strangers. He couldn't sit in the classroom. He was a danger to himself and others. His school finally decided that they couldn't keep him, so they consulted with us. Because I'm not an educator, it's always easy to say yes. That was one of the blessings of being a mechanical engineer. So Hamis came here. The first few weeks he was very violent. He would go to the top of this 5-story building and try to throw himself off. One day I heard our special needs education counselor discussing Hamis's case. The conclusion was that we cannot help him. He shouldn't be in Hope Flower School. And that really hit me very hard. I said, listen, if we can't help children like Hamis, it's better for us all to go home. We have to find a solution for him. It took us a while to find a child psychiatrist. We helped Hamis. He spent 2 years here and then had to be transferred to another school because that's all we could do here with our classes. But we managed to help him. For me, if we failed in that case, one of the most difficult cases, it's better for us all to go home.
Shay Davidovich joined Breaking the Silence in 2012 after serving in the Israel Defense Force, the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, from 2005 through 2008, and then in the reserves from 2008 through 2012 as a reservist. Shay spoke to us on November 8th from the Everest Hotel in Bethlehem in the West Bank.
What we are trying to do is to create a public discourse about the moral implications of the occupation. Here in Israel, we all have to serve in the military. I personally served from 2005 to 2008 in a unit called Field Intelligence. The last time I served as a reservist was in 2012 in Gaza. Right afterwards, I joined Breaking the Silence. the West Bank. Life there is very nice and very easy. Many Israelis don't see it as a settlement. I grew up surrounded by Palestinians, but I never spoke with Palestinians. And there were no interactions among us. The first time I actually met a Palestinian is when I'm wearing my uniform, holding a gun, and I'm a soldier in the occupied territories. Let me tell you about my first day as a soldier. We had our basic training for 1 month, and afterwards we are sent on our first mission to guard a settlement called Susia in the South Hebron Hills, right next door to a Palestinian village, also called Susia. We are given a short briefing from one of the settlers. He tells us where Palestinians are allowed to walk and where they are not allowed to walk, when we are supposed to shoot and when we are not supposed to shoot. After the briefing, I volunteered to take the first shift in the most dangerous post, the one facing the Palestinian village. The place is very quiet, very beautiful, and nothing at all happening. I was ready to meet my first terrorist. And after 2 or 3 hours, all of a sudden, one of the settlers comes in his car to where I'm standing. He tells me he has seen a Palestinian walking beside the settlement, and we need to check it out. He tells me he has seen a Palestinian walking beside the settlement. We need to check it out. He tells me to get in his car. He is the commander, so I start chasing something, but I can't really see what it is. It is very stressful. It takes me a few minutes to locate the target we are chasing. And then I see a boy, maybe 5 years old. He was completely naked, wearing only a pair of rain boots. He was running away from us, crying and screaming hysterically. And my first reaction was to freeze on the spot and think, what the hell is going on? And the settler keeps chasing after him, so I keep chasing after him also. And all of a sudden, the boy disappears behind some rocks. And so we go back to the car and drive back to the military post. And the settler drops me off and he says, great job. And I'm standing there wondering, again, what the hell just happened? Chasing after a kid with a loaded gun. It seemed crazy to me. And it made me then start to question the role of the army in Israel. When I got out of the army, the last thing I wanted to do was think about what I'd been doing there. I wanted to move on in my life, and I think this is something we all share to break in the silence. Breaking the silence was started by a group of soldiers who were serving in Hebron during the Second Intifada Palestinian uprising. Hebron was one of the most violent places, as it is today. When the soldiers went home to their families on the weekends, they noticed a gap between their families' understanding of the role of the army and what they were actually doing. There's an order given to most soldiers called making our presence felt. From the Army's point of view, it is important to stop the Palestinians from resisting our control. They are less likely to attack if they feel our Army is there 24/7. And since the Army can't be everywhere, they need to create the impression, the IDF needs to create the impression that they are always watching in order to make their presence felt. The soldiers on night shift would choose a Palestinian house at random, knock on the door, and not very politely so they know the Army is there, and gather everyone in the living room, ask for their IDs, and then start searching the house. It can take between 30 minutes and an hour, and the soldiers will often go back to the same house the following week and do exactly the same thing. 4 years ago, I was called up as a reservist to take part in a mock training activity to conquer southern Lebanon. The Army's decision about the best way to train 1,000 soldiers to conquer villages in southern Lebanon is to practice in the West Bank. We were taken by helicopter in the middle of the night, dropped off in the middle of nowhere. We create our fake military post and we go to sleep. When we wake up in the morning, we're standing in front of a Palestinian village. Every night for a week, we move to a different Palestinian village, and while we are there, we visit each house. Not harming anyone. We have tanks which are shooting, not in the village, but outside. We have helicopters dropping soldiers off and picking them up. It was very loud with all of the explosions. I wondered what it for the villages being in a state of war for a week. The purpose of these maneuvers was not just to train us, but also to train the Palestinians to feel that we are always there. The army also believes the best way to train a soldier how to arrest a Palestinian is to arrest one, to actually carry out a mock arrest. It is best to start with one who will not actually pose a threat. We are given the address of someone who we know for sure is not involved in terrorism. We blindfold the person, handcuff him, take him for a ride around the village, or take him back to the base and return him the next morning. Most Israeli soldiers don't have bad intentions. Most of them want to be seen as moral occupiers. I think everyone has red lines, things they're not willing to do. But sometimes you find yourself crossing a red line, and then it happens over and over again. And you find yourself setting a new red line that you think you will never cross. And then you find yourself crossing that also. If you really want to sum up what we're saying in Breaking the Silence, is that you can't be a moral occupier. This is what occupation looks like. We need to help people understand the price the Palestinians are paying for this occupation. In Israel, there is no discussion about those things at the moment. I don't think most soldiers think the same way that I do. Many think this is the action we need to take in order to ensure security. 10 years ago, there was a high level of support for what we are doing, and we were invited to be part of that discourse. But today, we are actually attacked by the media and the government, who say not just that we are traitors, but that we are a foreign entity, that we are indeed anti-Semitic. And now much of the discourse about breaking the silence is not about the content of what we are saying. It is about questioning our legitimacy.
Rendell is the resource director of Hagar School, Hannah Rendell is the resource director of the Hagar School, Jewish Arab Education for Equality in Beersheva. Beersheva is in the south of Israel, which comprises 2/3 of the landmass is actually a desert. Beersheva is the capital of the Nativ. She spoke to us on November 10th at the Hagar School.
Welcome to Hagar School. We're sitting in what used to be a rundown bomb shelter that has been renovated. It's a ship, an oasis in the middle of the desert. It was very important for us to have a library that contains Hebrew and Arabic books. While the children are in here, they can continue with their lessons. It's very calming. It's a sad reality, but while we are in here, they are allowed to continue being normal. Hagar School is 8 years old. We were started by 4 sets of Jewish and Arab parents who were doctors and professors at Ben Gurion University and Soroka Hospital. They were friends, and they wanted their children to go to school together. In Israel, there are 3 kinds of state education: secular Jewish, religious Jewish, and Arab. There are a lot of options for Jewish children. Arab children can go to a Jewish school, and many do. But there are no Arab schools in Beersheva. There are Arab schools on the periphery and in Bedouin villages, but they are grossly underfunded. The teaching quality is poor. Arab parents have to choose between their children retaining their culture and enjoying being with other Arab children, or compromising this and sending them to Jewish secular schools where their narratives are completely and utterly ignored. So these 4 Arab and Jewish professional couples decided that they wanted a good level of education, and they wanted their children to grow up in an atmosphere where they could continue to be Arab or Jewish. They could continue with their own identity, but side by side. Today we have a daycare for 1 to 3-year-olds, 2 kindergarten classes, an early childhood learning center, and elementary classes up to 6th grade. We are currently teaching 240 children, and we're still growing. We partner with the Ministry of Education, which means we're a public state school. Our founders could have created a private school that would be self-sustaining, but because the area we're in is very poor, our board wanted to accept local kids from Beersheva, both Arab and Jewish. The state gave us the building, teachers, the Ministry of Education curriculum, everything. We took it and said, thanks very much. Now we're going to make it equal. So we hired a second teacher for each class, for every class. There is an Arab and Jewish teacher, so children will grow up to be bilingual. We're pioneers, just like Yad B'Yad, hand in hand. They and we are the only ones doing this in Israel. The classes are 50-50, Arab and Jewish. In the beginning, it was hard to get Jewish students. That was unsurprising. But there were no good Arab schools for Arab students, so Hagar was a very good solution to their problems. Whereas Jewish parents had to have a good reason to want to come here. In the beginning, the classes were small, and there were more Arabs than Jews. Today, we have waiting lists on both sides. We looked at the curriculum from the Education Ministry and said, okay, we'll make sure our kids pass your tests. But the kids are from such different levels with such different backgrounds that this curriculum doesn't apply to all of them. We need to find a new model. Most of all, for gender studies. We have big challenges with gender studies here. We really wanted to make that part of our curriculum. There are no exams other than the state-imposed tests, which are important to evaluate our success in teaching the children mathematics, science, and English, and the things their parents are worried about. The children score very well in these tests, but the children know that these tests are of little importance other than to mark the school, not them. I made Aliyah to Israel with a very naive Zionist view. My husband is from Sweden. We met in England. We came to Beersheva because we wanted to contribute to the development of the Negev desert. We sent our children to a secular Jewish kindergarten. I had heard about Hagar from a friend who worked here. I said, it sounds lovely, but I'll bet it's all about peace, 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 and it forgets about the education. Then I started to work here and get to know the school. I went home to my husband and said, how can I talk about how wonderful it is and not move the children? He was more nervous than I was. He probably never had a meaningful conversation with an Arab in his life. I was having daily relationships with Arabs. One day, when my 6-year-old Raphael was 3, he came home holding a toy gun, and he was crying. I asked, why are you crying? He said, because I was at a friend's birthday party, and they gave all the girls fairy wands and all the boys guns. I wanted the fairy wand, and they told me I couldn't have a fairy wand because I'm a boy. I looked at my husband and said, final straw, that's it. He said, okay, fine, I don't stand a chance now. I took Raphael to the shop and said, I'm going to buy you the biggest fairy wand in Beersheva. You can wave gender equality on everyone. Now both my children are here. They're really good, they're speaking really good Arabic, fluent Hebrew, and Swedish, and English. In the first week, my kids are in Hagar. It's Eid al-Adha, the Muslim sacrifice feast. Jews and Muslims have a different take on the story of the sacrifice. For Muslims, Abraham was to sacrifice Ishmael, and for Jews, it was Isaac. I said, okay, my husband is going to love this. It's a huge celebration. Unlike Jews, Muslims don't have a lot of religious holidays. There's a lot of dancing, a lot of food. All the Arab children are wearing white gowns, and all the Jewish children have white flowers in their hair. The children don't end up confused. They know who they are, but they do know about the other celebration. The Arab teacher takes center stage. The kids are singing in Arabic. I asked my husband, how are you? When we walked out, he said, well, I don't know about this. I said, I understand. Well, let's just see. The next celebration was Hanukkah. The Jewish teacher took the lead. They invited my husband to light the Hanukkah candles, and he felt better. Everything was in Hebrew, and he heard the teacher telling the story of Hanukkah, and all the kids were interested. When he walked out, he said, you know, Hannah, if they did Eid al-Adha now, I would probably enjoy it. Because now I know that they're also doing my narrative. I wouldn't be so scared. I wouldn't feel marginalized and ignored. He said to him, you feel like that, you're 35. Imagine how a 5-year-old feels in class, sitting there and everything is not about him or her. Over the last 4 years that we've been at Hagar, my husband absolutely loves it. How do we cope with the holidays? What Jews celebrate as Israel Independence Day, Arabs mourn as the Nakba, the catastrophe. Commemoration of the Nakba by more than 5 people is illegal in Israel. You can be arrested. It's very difficult to talk only about one side's narrative. We sing the national anthem and completely ignore the Arab perspective. We came to an agreement with the Ministry of Education. We can't acknowledge Nakba Day outside of school, but we can acknowledge it in the classroom. In every classroom on Nakba Day, we have a picture, a poem, and a story. The teachers use it as part of the daily lesson. Then comes Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, or Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And in that corner, we have a picture, a poem, a story. The reason is to say, when it's Holocaust Day as a Jew, I look at this board, the people there look like my family. The poem is familiar to me, the narrative is familiar to me, and I feel sad. When it's Nakba Day, different people, different narrative. I might not even agree with it, but I remember the feeling I had when my holiday was on the board. I know that some of my friends in the class might be feeling sad today. I need to give them the space to have their own feelings. We think we do this really well. We have 1,000 members supporting our school, all across the political and economic spectrum. Political views are set aside. Everybody wants the same thing in the long run. There's no hatred here.
Jamal Meqbil is a Palestinian barber and peace activist who is a member of Roots, that organization that I mentioned at the beginning. It brings Israeli settlers together with local Palestinians who live nearby. It endeavors to shift hatred and suspicion to trust, empathy, and mutual support. Jamal spoke to us on November 9th at the Roots compound in the West Bank.
I am Jamal Meqbil. I am from a family of refugees from 1948. We lost our town, Iraq al-Manshia, now called Kiryat Gat. My family traveled to many places, to the refugee camps in Jordan, also Saudi Arabia, and other places. I ended up in the town of Beit Umar, north of Hebron, at that time under Jordanian rule. I was in Beit Umar during the first Intifada in 1988. I was in school, very young, 15 years old. I was very active. I do everything I can. Throw stones, was in demonstrations. I was in jail 2 times during the first Intifada, 4 times altogether. In jail, I learned much about Palestinian history, violence and nonviolence. I need to choose which way. After the Oslo peace agreements of 1993, I opened my mind to the agreement, started to think about my life, my history in the West Bank. Instead of destroying, I decided to build. I built a house on land my father bought in 1965. We are a big family in a small house. When the soldiers came in 2000 with the first demolition order, many things changed. What should I do? I was between 2 ways, occupation and throwing stones, or Oslo. Then the second Intifada came, and our whole way of life changed. The roads, the checkpoints, all my energies turned to my family to care for them. Then one day a friend from Jericho called, asking me to come to a meeting with Israelis. Just come and listen. I was shocked. Israelis? I thought, he's crazy. My friend said, Jamal, just come and listen. You do not need to touch any of them. Just listen. Not easy for me to meet the people who occupied us, injured me, jailed me, took my town. All I knew about Israelis was soldiers, checkpoints, guns, settlements, demolition orders. I came home to tell my wife and my son what my friend had told me. They didn't believe me. My wife thought it was a joke. My son asked, is it true? I talked with myself, to go or not to go. I went. I met Israelis. All of us talked. I went back and told my wife. She said, you are crazy, not normal. It was the beginning. I continued. I noticed most Israelis don't know enough about Palestinians from the West Bank, the camps and towns under occupation. I wanted to tell the Israelis about their soldiers and police, what they do in the West Bank and at the checkpoints. Many of them know nothing about Palestinians. Them, Palestinians are violent people who want to throw the Jews into the sea. For me, that is not true. We have our history. We are human. I started to teach them about Palestinian life under the occupation. Not easy. When I started to meet Israelis, I lost a lot of things. I lost my job. I am a barber with a barber shop in Beit Umar. I lost my customers. I lost my place in my family and in my wife's family. I used to be a hero. But after my meeting with the Israelis, they would not even look at me. Some were against me in the mosque. They said, you are not a Muslim. Do you not have eyes to see? The soldiers come every night, damage houses, arrest us. It is not easy. The situation is not normal. It is still the occupation. There is blood flowing, more and more on our side. Farmers cannot go into the fields. Children cannot go to their schools. Sometimes I think violence is easier, but I continue in this difficult way of nonviolence. One day, 5 years ago, an Israeli friend met me in Jerusalem and he hugged me. He said, "Today I will take you anywhere in Israel. Where do you want to go? Any restaurant you want. To Jaffa, to the sea, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Any place," he said. "Today I am here for you with my car." I said, "I heard about the Holocaust, about the Yad Vashem Museum in Israel. Can you drive me there?" He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, I'm sure. I don't need to go to the sea or to Al-Aqsa." We went to Yad Vashem because I believe that to deal with others, you need to try to know about them. If you don't know about me, then you can't deal with me. People are not all the same. Some are against me. Others welcome me. Some are afraid. I am afraid when I am here now, especially these days. I am afraid, but this does not mean I will close my doors. We continue to try. My courage comes from my pain. I think the pain must push us and teach us to end the conflict. If we know the pain, I think it is easy to find the medicine, to end the blood, to stop it. Our kids, our life. We need to look in the mirror. My mirror is my kids. When I see that my kid is afraid, this is one of the reasons that opens my heart more and more. I think now we need to buy small flowers to give them to the soldiers at the checkpoints, to the soldiers that killed our kids, who closed the roads. Not as a gift, but to get them to think about stopping the killing. One soldier not so far from here was named Hero of the Week because he killed 3 Palestinians. If I meet him, it will not be easy, but I will give him some flowers. Not because he killed my people, but because maybe there is still a little in his heart. I need to help him open his eyes and his heart.
Roni Keidar is a 75-year-old Jewish grandmother who was born in London. She swore she would never do public speaking. She was a severe introvert. She stayed to herself and to her family. And now she travels the world as an outspoken advocate for the need for Palestinians and Israelis to learn to live side by side. Her passion for peace led her to an organization called Other Voice. It's an effort by citizens on the communities on both sides of the Gaza Strip wall, down in the southeastern part of Israel, who believe that their violent day-to-day reality can and must be altered. Roni spoke to us from her house in Nativ Ha-Asara on November 11th.
My name is Keidar, and I would like to tell you how I got to this place. This moshav, our agricultural community, Nativ Ha-Asara, and this place in terms of my perspective and commitment to peace. This moshav did not always sit where it is now, right on the border with northern Gaza. Nativ Ha-Asara was first established in 1972 in the Sinai Desert across from the Gaza's southern border. Our village was a fantastic success story. The sand was good to us, the climate was good to us, and we managed to grow and pick crops when they couldn't be grown or picked anywhere else in the country. This, of course, meant that our produce got extremely high prices. We were doing so well for ourselves that most families enlarged their homes, enlarged their families, and we went into more and more sophisticated and modern types of technology in agriculture. We are a little far out and detached from anywhere else, so we had to create our own quality of life, emphasizing what we thought was important to our way of life and to our specific community. There was always a very normal, natural, good relationship with all our neighbors in the north of the Sinai. Our nearest town was Rafah, and we went to visit Palestinians, do business with them, and many of them came to work with us in our fields. Really, a very normal, good relationships as neighbors should have. And then, one day, the totally unexpected happened. An Arab leader offered his hand in peace. This is something we never, ever thought could happen. And when you say never, this is what is meant. But there we were, 1979, Anwar Sadat offers his hand in peace. The condition of this peace was that we leave the northern Sinai, and the whole area is returned to Egypt. This created a very strong conflict within each and every one of us. On the one hand, the longings for peace, which we all had. On the other hand, our concept of peace did not go together with having to be evacuated from our homes, having to uproot our plantations. Some protested, some cried out. We tried to put over a message that there must be another way. But when we realized that it was either peace or staying in northern Sinai, it was obvious what we should do. So we chose a group of people to look across the country and choose a place for us to live. And this is the place they chose, right on the border of the Gaza Strip. And you might very well ask, as many do, what on earth would you do a thing like that? The thing was that we wanted to be as close as we could to our original village, knowing the agricultural advantages we had there, without being on negotiable land. So we are within the internationally recognized borders of Israel. 66 families came here, right across the border from the Gaza Strip. We built a new village. Today there are 230 families, and we are already talking about our next expansion. When we first came here, once again, everything was very normal. Many of the people from the Gaza came to work with us. We used to go and visit them, and they came to visit us. A normal, neighborly relationship until the mid-90s. Then things started changing. Suicide bombers with explosive trucks blowing up in the middle of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and many other parts of the country coming out of Gaza. Every time this happened, the borders would be closed. No one was allowed in or out. Things went from bad to worst. Rockets, missiles, mortar shells on a daily basis, several times a day. You never know when. Even now, when I'm talking to you, I can't be 100% sure that there won't be an alert at a certain point in our meeting. What should we do? My shelter in my house is very small. We have 15 seconds to get into the shelter. All we can do is lie on the ground and cover our heads with our hands and count our way in the sea, but we never know. We know that the rockets are very primitive. They can't accurately target. Usually it's like, weren't we lucky? They landed in an open field. We were luckier still when they fell into the sea. Lucky, lucky, lucky. But sometimes luck runs out. We do know that if a rocket hits, there is no hope. And one day, one of our girls in our village was coming home. She got out of the car, heard an alert. She started running into the house. And on the doorstep, she was hit directly by a rocket. She happened to be my daughter's best friend. Now I'm talking about day-to-day life. I'm not talking about wars. Where are we today? The same place, talking about the next round. Anyone you speak to, both here in Israel and the Palestinian territories, they're all talking about the next round. There's going to be a next round. It's bound to happen. Why? Why don't we do anything, really do anything to stop that next round? Not to reach out to the next round? I don't want a next round, and I'll do anything in my power to stop the next round. We've all got to realize, all of us, we are both here to stay. So we better start learning to live side by side, because it's never going to be one instead of the other. And I so wish we could realize this. Most people do, but leadership, nothing is further from their mind. At least that's how it looks at the moment. I believe, although I know many who don't, but I believe this is possible. And when people call me a dreamer, I say, I'm not the dreamer. The dreamers are those in Palestine who say that they want to abolish Israel and throw the Jewish people into the sea. That's not going to happen. They're a dreamer. The dreamers are those Israelis who think that you can bomb Gaza again and again and again, and eventually the Palestinians will come to their knees and beg for peace. It's not that way. That's not how we're going to get 11 and 13-year-olds to stop stabbing people in the streets. They're not going to come to their knees and beg for peace. Not like that. So they're dreaming. What I say can be a reality. So what I say is, wake up, people. Wake up, leadership. And understand that we've got to live here together, side by side, and we can have a beautiful life.
Thank you. Leah Werber, Donna Palley, Ibrahim, Issa, Scudder, Shay, Davidovich, Scott, Dickman, Jamal Meqbil, Winnett, and Rendell, Cohen, Keidar, Susan Palmer. You took us back there.
So we have a couple of proposals for you to choose from so that we can share some of how we've been together and what we've experienced. There may be some of you that would like to address the 4 questions that are on the last page of your handout and also hanging up here. There may be some of you that would like to do that on your own, writing, and thinking about our questions. There's space on the handout for you to jot down your ideas. Or some percentage of you might want to find a partner and spend a few minutes compassionately listening to each other. You might have one of you go first and answer one of the questions while you listen, and then trade places. And then, I think after about 10 minutes total, 5 each, then we'll gather you back again and have a shared discussion. And for that, we're going to hope or suggest that you speak about your experience, and then we'll allow a few seconds of silence before the next person speaks. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this sounds easy, but it's the hardest part of the whole day. How a listener can help a speaker. The best thing to do is stay out of the way. Let the speaker discover, make connections, dig deep. Don't interject. If you do ask a question, think very carefully, what am I trying to accomplish with this question? Don't ask a question to satisfy your curiosity. Don't ask a question so that you can say, hey, I feel just like you do. Don't ask a question to take the speaker's hands off his or her own steering wheel. What you want to do is stay out of the way. And if that speaker seems to be stuck, then you might try one of these. These are called opening questions. Don't insert yourself into that person's story. Could you say more about that? Can you help me understand? How do you feel about it? Where do you find hope in this situation? Help me understand why this is important to you. Do you sense any unmet needs in this situation? Apply with caution. And what I suggest is for those of you who want to split, some people think better on their own in a corner. Some people think better when they write, alone, in isolation. Some people think better in terms of processing when they talk. And you can choose to do that. Give each other the gift of 5 minutes of compassionate listening. And then we'll trade places. And then what we'll ask is for everybody to come back. How are we doing energy-wise here? This is, we want to gauge your energy here. If anybody has to leave, we understand. If you want to work a little longer on this, articulate your own connections, please stay with us. We have the room until 3:30. And as I said, we found in our other presentations that this is often the most valuable part of the presentation. So the whole sanctuary, you can spread out. Actually, you can go through that door right there into the library if you want some privacy. And we'll wait about 3 minutes until everybody's settled, and then we will say 5 minutes, we'll start the time. minutes, I'm going to start the first 5-minute session. Okay, everybody decide what you're doing, how you're going to process what you heard. Ready to go? Okay. We'll let you know when 5 minutes is up.
Get something to drink. I could consider it
30 seconds for the speaker to finish. I'll invite people to switch if you're in a dyad. If the speaker has already spoken, I'll ask the speaker to take a listener's role. And someone who has not spoken, I see some people are in groups of more than 2 people. I'm going to ask those who have, can I have your attention for a minute, please? I'm going to ask people to stop talking for just a moment. My apologies, sorry to interrupt, but what I'd like to do is just be silent together for 30 seconds. I want to give people who haven't spoken yet a chance to reflect. See if you can identify something that is close to the surface that you want to explore. And I would ask each combination of people to respect, to look to somebody who hasn't spoken yet and offer them the first opportunity to speak. Okay, have at it.
that there's lots of people who think that way. Most of these are like outliers. Then what do you do? We don't know that.
And that can be
I'll ask you to wrap up in 30 seconds, please. You'll see at the very bottom, we're asking for suggestions for our next presentation. What might we do differently? What wasn't optimal for you? How can we improve this? And you can say nice things too if you want. If you want to stay in touch with this process, you can put your email address down in your name, but there's absolutely no need to do that. You can submit this anonymously if you'd like.
So did you all solve the problem for the world?
Yes, we did.
I want to read that thing.
So I'm opening the floor here now for anyone to share some of their thoughts about our questions. You can start with the first question about, was there anything that surprised you? What was it?
The diversity of the pockets of people on both sides, all the different, and the people who had encountered violence themselves, who were looking for peace, who were willing to meet with the other side and think about the other side.
I think the problem solving, that is understanding how trauma needs to be dealt with because it can lead to violence. And the Hope Flowers, the name of the school, that saw that. And the young soldier who said, if you keep moving the line, you're going to, just desensitize yourself, and where he certainly had a compassionate heart, it seemed. So those creative ways of moving out of where they were to some new space was very impressive.
Just wondering if when you were over there, you listened to people that didn't get it, like you chose a group to present that mostly got it. Did you listen to people that didn't get it, who were angry? That it was like hard to make yourself stay in the room and hear what they had to say?
And did you choose to leave that part of the trip out for this presentation?
I have to say, I think there is only one listening session that I'm recalling that was touched in a moment for a while with anger. And frankly, I think that part of the anger got stirred up because as a group of new compassionate listeners, we were not asking opening questions. That's my take on it. And you could get 18 other opinions based on the other travelers that I traveled with. I think it might help you to know that the Compassionate Listening Project has had many trips to Israel-Palestine, and so they have partners there that are familiar with the format. And even though some of our speakers were speaking to a Compassionate Listening group for the first time, there are other repeat speakers. And so in that way, maybe the speakers were selected to have a certain criteria. I don't know if you would want to add anything, Joe.
That's a fair question, Becky. I'm glad you asked it. There was a criterion, and the criterion was that the people who we met with were committed to seek another path beyond violence. So that excludes a lot of people. The one person that Helen was referring to who showed some anger was Ruvain. That was Leah's husband in the kibbutz, K'far Etzion. And he was provoked, right? By a question that was very leading and judgmental. And I have it on video. He's an elderly man he's older than me. And he's got this hoary beard and sits back with his big belly. We have pictures, but I don't want to take the time to find them. And he got provoked at a question that challenged the legitimacy of his being in K'far Etzion. And as he talked, he characterized Muslims as filled with hate and driven by jihad, and his neck veins bulged, and his eyes got big as saucers, and he started to sweat and got really angry. And I think we did a better job after that in opening up a safe container for them to talk. And by the end, 90 minutes later, I have another video. Our leader, Leah, was saying, well, what was this like for you two? And Leah said, you know, it was different. I was expecting you guys to come in here and tell us what to think, but you, like everybody else, but you didn't. For the most part, you let us talk. And then Ruvain, who's now smiling, he looks like a Jewish Santa Claus. Really, arms open, body language relaxed, and he said, this is really interesting. By just listening to us talk ourselves, listening to ourselves, I realized that we're really in a very small world here, and we don't know a lot about what else is happening outside of our settlement. And that's what we strive for, is that compassionate listening opens up connections, take our hands off the steering wheel. Surprises, anything that surprised you?
So they're all stories so compelling and they're all powerful, but Jamal his ability to try to resist violence it's almost hard to understand. And in fact, I don't understand how it could not just want to revert.
Can you hear in the back?
No.
Okay, we can repeat. So, Paul Clark was expressing surprise at Jamal and his equanimity and his ability to transcend the violence that he experienced individually by reaching out the way he did. Anything else you want to add to that? Any other surprises?
I like your expression, take the hand off the steering wheel. That's a very profound way of explaining the whole process.
We didn't make that up. I wish, well, I don't wish we did that. We have this incredible group of many, many trainers who have been doing this for 25 years.
What did you appreciate?
I just appreciate the process. Being taught how to listen to somebody is so important, and I think it's so powerful. And this process is to have exposure to.
I actually appreciated the diversity of the readings and hearing different people's perspectives from the inside. It's really difficult to be living out in the diaspora and having to make judgments or decisions or informed opinions, and not living there makes it very different. And I did live there, and it's still different to see and listen to different perspectives, and I'm coming out of this with a different opinion also, which I appreciate, and thank you for that.
Other appreciations?
I appreciate the people who read the transcripts. This was incredibly powerful. And there was this, thank you.
She appreciates the people who read the transcripts. Thank you. Like I said, you brought us back. So I had a surprise. I just realized, well, I must have known before, but I never put it into words. Correct me if I'm wrong, Linda and Jean. Nobody talked much about religion while we were there. You know, you think of this as a holy war. People want to make it a holy war. It's Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it's the Western Wall, and it's the clash of civilizations that goes back 2,500 years. We met with 25 people, and you know what? I don't think religion, did it come up at all?
Well,
Oh, that's right, Eric. Well, yes, someone you haven't met who invoked the prophetic vision of the Hebrew Bible. Tikkun Olam. That's right. And he is the president of, the director of Rabbis for Human Rights. American-born, moved in, made Aliyah to Israel, and he's a thunderous man on the pulpit. I mean, he's just this inspiring guy. He was actually stabbed, came close to losing his life 3 weeks before we were there because he was in the Palestinian olive groves protecting the Palestinians during their harvest after the IDF and the police had left. And a hooded settler came out of nowhere with a knife. And this is on video, and we have it. We can show anybody who's interested. It's a YouTube video. And this guy chases him around. And Eric is trying to protect the reporter, gets between this hooded settler and the reporter, and then trips backwards. The settler's right over him with the knife. And something stops the settler from killing him. And when he talked to us about it, he did invoke Jewish values, the prophetic vision of Israel. That's right.
and his question to his attacker was, what was it that kept you from murdering me? Did you hear God's voice in that moment? Did you discover that you were not a murderer? And it was really a very powerful listening session.
So you didn't meet any Palestinian Christians?
Did we meet? Yes, we did. The question was, did we meet any Palestinian Christians? And we did. Actually, one of the first people we met was Ilda, what's her last name? Ilda is a 30-year-old Greek Orthodox Christian who lives in Bethlehem. And we met her on day 4. She has a yoga studio. Mary, you saw the video of her, where's my wife? Yeah, you saw the video. Beit Hashem is the place that she created. It's a House of the Sun, and that's a retreat for women, Palestinian women in the West Bank. Yeah, she was, let's see, other Christians. I have to go through the list. We met about 25 to 30 people. This is a pre-selected group. We just tried to come up with
An array.
an array. There's no cross-section. There's no representation. As you can see, each one of these is so powerfully idiosyncratic in its own way that you can't be what's fair and balanced. I don't know that there is anything that's fair and balanced when it comes to Israel. Challenging. What did you hear that challenged you? This might be perhaps the most valuable question to ask and to share. And I would just ask if someone has a thought. Again, we encourage you to couch it in a way that is self-reflective, I statements. But what was challenging for you? What was it about it that was challenging for you? Judy, do you have something that challenged you?
Something that you just said. I'm not sure what to make of it. At least the first person who was talking about being hit by rocks and that kind of thing. And I think she said no side is completely right. And I guess I find that challenging because it's not equal. You said there's nothing fair and balanced, and rightness isn't equal, or wrongness isn't equal in that situation, I think.
Thank you. Anyone else find something challenging? Yes.
Well, I don't know whether I would call it so much challenging, just the concept that the final speaker, where she spoke of people just living side by side. I mean, we are so determined to preserve individual states and nations. I mean, we even see it in our country. To think beyond that and just think of people living side by side is certainly a challenge for me as a concept, and certainly for the world as an actuality.
Anything else of Alan?
What challenged me? What I heard was what I expected to hear, that we were going to hear the testaments of people who are human beings, who desire peace, and as you said, it was a pre-selected group of people. The challenging thing is, here are these people with their peaceful visions, and where is it going to go? And how will it make things better? I mean, those of us who aren't living in Israel, we think of the solution as being political or diplomatic, hopefully not military, but political and diplomatic. These people live there, and despite the fact that they have relationships with people on the other side, and that they want peace, it isn't happening. And so the challenge is, what do we do from here in the United States?
And I'd love to talk to you more about that. And I know I will.
Yeah.
We will talk about that. I can share my own reflection on that. The day we left was the morning after the Paris bombings and 2 days after the Beirut bombings. The news, there was nothing good on the news while we were there. We stopped watching it. I didn't watch the news. The news had nothing to do with what we were experiencing. There was no connection that I can see. And on the one hand, I wrote some friends, some of you here. I said, we came back on the macro level. There's absolutely no hope that I have for peace in my generation or my kids' generation, maybe my grandchildren's, perhaps. On the macro level, there's nothing to be optimistic about politically. Yet these people that we met were so incredibly inspiring and courageous, and you got a taste of that. That to sit in their presence really created a place I can feel right now in my heart that I brought home that fills me with hope. As crazy and contradictory as that sounds, I came home hopeful. Not an answer, just an observation.
I appreciate your sharing as well, and I just want to say, I think there are so many, many, many ways that each one of us can find a way to work with peace. I don't know where the tipping point is. I don't know how many people working for peace it takes. I certainly agree that it's discouraging in some ways as much as it is inspiring to hear how deeply affected people's lives are on a daily basis. Another quote from Eric Asherman was, none of us is required to finish the task on our own. Neither can we desist from doing our part.
I really think that peace is going to come from the grassroots up, that it's going to be person to person and heart to heart. So I encourage everybody to know that each one of us has the power to affect that. I don't think it's going to be political or war. I think it's going to be from our hearts.
Anything that people want to know more about or are inspired to research or follow up on?
I just wanted to know how the speakers' presentations that were read were, how they came about. Did you go to these places and someone had prepared a speech to read to you, which then was what we heard, or was that a composite of the 90 minutes that you spent? How did that work?
Joel was the tech guy on our trip, and he made sure that every speaker at least was audio taped, some videotapes as well. And then coming home to look at all that material was, as you might imagine, quite a task, and we're just barely starting it, really, transcribing word for word. There were some editorial changes that we made because many of our speakers were not speaking English as a native language, and so in attempting to make the transcripts readable, we would change the tense of verbs. And we certainly excerpted, we picked through the listening sessions that were quite long to find these 7 or 8 minutes of what they had to say.
Time's up. Again, we're honored by your presence and by your interest in this. We draw strength from it. Thank you so much for coming from Concord and Massachusetts and the Seacoast. Really delighted to have you here. And we are happy to talk with any of you at any time more about this. We've been instructed we have to be out of here for the Cornfield rehearsal. Is that right? By 4 o'clock. So I will ask if you have feedback for us. Can you please write a sentence or two on what you think we could do better next time on that sheet, and just leave it with us, with or without your